All right. With us is a faculty member as well, Dr. Nick Toothman, and as well our speaker, Christoph Litomisky. Let me go ahead and um, just read a short bio about Christoph. Christoph is a software engineer at NVIDIA. His focus areas include autonomous vehicles, computer vision, and systems engineering. Mr. Litomisky studied computing at the Imperial College London and the University of California, Riverside. Just a note about this meeting. It is sponsored by the NSF Maestro program. Statements made by individuals in this interview do not reflect the position or policy of the U.S. government. As well, my colleague is visiting us as an individual. He is not representing the NVIDIA Corporation in an official capacity, and the contents of this discussion are strictly his opinions. All right, cool. So I guess we'll go ahead and start off. Christoph, would you like to say hello to everybody? Maybe introduce yourself and just talk a little bit about your background.
Yeah, sure. I'd be happy to do that. First of all, thanks for having me here. It's great to be here, and I'm excited to talk to all of you guys. Excited to hear what questions you have as I try to unpin myself, because I don't like looking at myself when I talk. Yeah, so I'm currently a senior software engineer at NVIDIA. I work on the Drive team, which is NVIDIA's platform for autonomous vehicles. NVIDIA doesn't make cars, so the stuff that we make actually gets used by other car makers like Mercedes, Jaguar Land Rover, and so on. Maybe I'll tell you a little bit about how I got into software engineering. It started with a really bad knee injury, actually. This was in high school. I was playing soccer, tore my ACL really, really badly, and basically had to take a whole year off. And so for the first time, basically ever, I had a bunch of free time that I wasn't sure what to do with. And so I did the next best thing to playing sports, which was join my school's robotics team. And it was a ton of fun. This is the first robotics league. I don't know if any of you guys are familiar with it, but basically you build robots and then compete with other high school teams who also build their robots. It was a ton of fun. And I felt like if anybody might be willing to pay me to do this kind of stuff, then that's exactly what I should do. And so that's the path that I've pursued since then. In undergrad, I did computer engineering, so a mix of software engineering and electrical engineering. And then in grad school, I went to University of California, Riverside with Alberto Cruz here, and focused primarily on computer vision and machine learning. I was actually in the PhD program, but after 2 years, I got a master's degree. And that summer, I had a really great internship at NASA Jet Propulsion Laboratory. And I felt like I was getting so much there. I felt like I was learning way faster than in grad school. And so I decided to extend that internship for quite a while, and eventually ended up dropping out of grad school and stayed at JPL for a little bit. And then I moved to a startup in New York called Kimi, where I did computer vision work. Did that for a couple of years. And then after that, I made a very interesting pivot to take over as CEO of the company that my dad had co-founded some 20 years earlier. This is a company called EcoGate, and we make intelligent controls for factories. So hardware and software components. Did that for about 5 years. Then I felt like it was time to achieve a lifelong dream, which was round the world travel on my own. So I gradually left the job. I think I made it through 14 countries or 16 countries, something like that, in about 6 months. And then COVID happened. I came back, worked for a robotics kind of venture studio for a little bit in LA, and then eventually joined NVIDIA, and that's where I am now.
All right, cool. I guess we'll go ahead and hop right into the first question here from Jarl. You said you had an internship. Just generally, based on your experience, how important is it in getting an internship when it comes to finding jobs after college for computer science?
I would say it's extremely important. I would say it's probably, so let me put it this way, you should get good grades, work hard and get good grades in your classes, but that's kind of the baseline, right? Everybody who's gonna get a job is gonna have decent grades, right? So how can you go a level higher? How can you stand out from that crowd? And in my mind, there's two ways. Probably the best way is to get an internship. So get an internship and make it as good a company as you can. The more brand recognition that the company has, the better. For internships, 100% true. So, if you can do it at a big company like Google or Nvidia or Amazon or whatever, something that's very recognizable, that's the best. And then the other way I think that you can stand out from the crowd a little bit is to do projects outside of class that really show that you've built something that works and that actually solves a useful problem. So if this is, if you're interested in robotics, make a robot and make it do something useful. If you're interested in web programming, make a web application that actually solves some problems that real people have and that you've actually deployed and that actual people are using. I think those are two great ways to stand out of the crowd.
And so I think maybe you implied this. So every job will pretty much expect some sort of internship experience of a graduate?
I can't say that every job will expect that. I can say that it will be helpful for every job for sure.
And so in terms of entry-level positions from maybe lesser known companies, do you still believe that it would be a requirement or helpful for someone to have an internship?
To be honest, Albert, and this is maybe like a idiosyncrasy of mine, but I am not convinced that there are any requirements in life and that if you're good enough, you will find a way. So I would not call it a requirement, but I will say that I struggle to imagine a case where it would not be extremely helpful.
All right. And actually, I have a question for myself here. We were talking about internships, but you actually also started talking about projects. Do you have is there any more you'd like to add on that? Like as far as, is there any particular type of way to organize your projects or anything you'd recommend to the students here? How to showcase some sort of portfolio or something?
Yeah, I mean, I personally think it's a good idea for you guys, if you're getting out of school, you're applying for jobs, have a personal website that serves as your portfolio, right? So somebody Googles your name, and then, if you don't have a rare name like I do, if somebody Googles your name and the name of your university, they find a website and they click it, and in 30 seconds, they can get an idea of the kinds of projects that you've worked on, and they can follow links, and maybe there's a YouTube video that shows, hey, this is what I did here. Maybe there's a link to an actual deployed application, web app that they can play with. Yeah, I think if I were you guys and I was graduating college and applying for jobs, I would have a website that shows the kind of stuff that I've done.
And I think you said you took over your father's company or some sort, you were CEO. Were you involved in any hiring workflows at that point?
Oh yeah, absolutely. And I've been involved in the hiring workflows basically since I started at Kimi. So that's now for over 10 years that I've been hiring people.
So how would, in an interview workflow, how would someone be able to showcase the projects that they had completed? Are there questions that are asked of them, or
yeah, so great question. I would say the importance of the projects that you've worked on actually comes in even before the interview. You should have them listed on your resume. And then, so if somebody's trying to tell, sometimes you'll have 50 candidates. How do you find the 5 best ones to interview? Well, your resume should have a really awesome 1 or 2 sentence description of some awesome project that you did and a link to a place where I can learn more. And I will follow that link and watch the YouTube video. So ideally, if I'm a good interviewer, I'll already have an idea about the kinds of projects that you've done before we get to the actual interview. And then in the interview, I can ask you targeted questions about those projects. And if it doesn't come up, one great way that I've found it, and if you guys Google my name, I'm lucky that I have a rare name, you'll find my blog. And on that blog, you'll find a couple of software posts where I talk about a couple projects that I've done. And actually, when I was interviewing for this job that I got and other jobs at the same time, I would say more than half of the interviews that I did, I sent somebody during the interview a link to a blog post about that. I would say, oh yeah, I did something very similar here. I'm going to paste this link here. You can check it out after the interview if you want more information, but let me tell you about it now. And so that way, a lot of the time, they could go deeper after the interview, and maybe also we had some visuals to go along with the answers that I was giving during the interview.
All right, cool. So, I guess the next question from Daniel Torres, how do you prepare for interviews? Maybe just general tips for how to prep for interviews, because you were talking about how to prep somebody's resume, maybe moving on toward the next step where maybe they get a call. How should someone prepare for an interview?
Yeah, and just to be clear, all of you guys here are software engineering students or computer science students, is that right?
Yeah, BSCS. Yeah.
Okay, great. Um, yeah, so there will be multiple kinds of interviews that you will have. You know, there will be some coding interviews and some, I guess, what do they call them? Behavioral interviews. I would say, so actually, one thing that wasn't obvious to me that nobody had told me was to set my own expectations appropriately. And in particular, I was kind of disappointed. You know, I applied for 3 jobs and I didn't hear back from any of them. It's like, what the hell's going on? You know, something must be weird. But actually, that's fairly normal. And I think every time that I applied for jobs, I probably got to close to 100 applications. And so you guys should just set your expectations that this might be a slog, and you have to, you know, stay positive and keep at it, and be ready to be submitting applications. For the actual interviews, maybe let's talk about the coding interviews first. So expect them. You're going to get coding interviews. Any competent software company is going to ask you to do a coding interview. And you should be prepared for those because, you know, it's been a while since I've been in college. But I think that the coding interviews, even though they try to kind of, the goal is to gauge your software engineering skills, they're still kind of different. And so they're unique. And so they won't necessarily reflect exactly what you do in school, right? It's usually like a little weird algorithmic question, and you gotta figure it out in like 5 minutes. Otherwise, it's not gonna go super well. So it's a lot of pressure. So prep for that, practice for that. I personally, there's a book called Cracking the Coding Interview by Gail Lachman, I think. And that book is super helpful. So I would encourage you to buy the book, read through it. It gives you all kinds of interview prep. There's a bunch of sample questions and strategies for you to apply, and then practice those. So I usually use a site called LeetCode. Go to LeetCode and just do some LeetCodes. You know, I'm sorry to say, it's not necessarily going to make you a better software engineer, but it is going to make you better at interviewing for software engineering jobs. So might be a good idea to do that.
And I just want to add my story here. I always tell this story to students just so they know that you will sometimes do very poorly in these. And I think you were saying you apply to hundreds of these anyways. So that's important to apply to hundreds of them so that when you feel that you've screwed one up, that it's not that big of a deal. Christoph, when we were in grad school, I was applying to a software engineering company or something like that. And you have to make sure to read the prompt very clearly, because they asked me for a Fibonacci sequence and the guy wanted it to start at 1-1 or something like that. And my solution was 0-1. And they simply were telling me the solution is incorrect without giving me any further input. And that was that. I didn't get the job, and here I am now. I'm a professor. So I guess it worked out, you know. But anyways, so was it hard for you too? Did you ever run into situations where some of the questions you got were just super weird or something? Or
yeah, I mean, I've definitely done not so well in some software interviews. Even I think this round where I ultimately landed at NVIDIA, you know, I was interviewing with another big tech company, and just got a question that had my sense is actually, if I were to chase it down, I think it was an NP hard question. And so there was like, you basically had to do a search over the whole thing, which to me, like, it was like super complex. And so and it was like way beyond the scope of the interview. And so that kind of flustered me. And so I did really poorly there. I think, yeah, they did still offer me to go to the next step, but at like a lower level than I was hoping to land in. Anyway, so even if you do poorly, my point is they consider you as a whole package, right? And the software coding interview is just one piece of input into that. And so even if you do poorly, don't despair. You know, there might be other reasons why they might like you, and if you do well in the other interviews, you might still get an offer.
So I kind of interrupted you there with my story, but you were building up to software interviews. I think we talked about we anything else about the other type. Everybody focuses on the technical interview so much, but is it so important to prepare yourself for the other types of interview?
Yeah, I think so. In particular, you should have, figure out the kinds of questions that you're likely to get asked, and those include the boring, what are your strengths, what are your weaknesses, but questions also about your background, questions about what you want to do, and so on. So practice those. Have answers ready to go for those, not necessarily verbatim where you're repeating it like a robot every time, but have some bullet points. Make sure that they're concise, make sure that they're clear, make sure that those answers flow, right? And people often, like, there's like the suggested format for these two. Situation, this is what the situation was. Action, here's what I personally did, and the result, and we increased the company's profitability by 7% or whatever. Right, so practice all of those for the common questions that you get. You could have, if you can do mock interviews somewhere, those might be helpful. I also actually, so speaking of, practicing those, I would have them written down and then have them like to the side of like the Zoom window or whatever. So if I got stuck or flatlined, I could look through my 15 stories that I have ready to go and like, oh yeah, this one applies. And
You'll have Chat GPT open off to the side.
Yeah, there you go. One other like interview tip that I think applies in general, so I've done hundreds of interviews, and sometimes your interview is going to be tired, they're going to be overworked, they're going to be hungry, right? They're just coming out of a meeting where something horrible happened. So do your best to make things really easy on the interviewer. You want to be the guy where everything goes right. So you're on time. I think so actually there's research that suggests that higher quality audio makes you sound smarter. So if I sound really smart right now, it's because I have this nice microphone, right? So don't just rely on your crappy laptop microphone. I think a quality microphone is a good investment. Be in a well-lit room, and I don't think I'm doing that. All the lights behind me here. But yeah, make things really easy. Have your resume ready to go. It's like, oh, they didn't send me your resume. Oh, here, I'll just paste it into the link to it into the chat. Just in every way that you can imagine, be the candidate where everything is really easy for the interviewer. Yeah, I guess that's that. Did I answer your question?
Daniel, is that all good? Any other questions there?
Yeah, that's good. Thank you.
Okay, well, while we're waiting for his response, I guess we'll move on to his next question. And this one's actually about graduate school. It's my understanding that, or at least what I tell the students here is that they probably want to do a little bit of industry first and then get their master's. But it seems that you've done the opposite, where first you did your PhD, actually checked out with a master's instead, and then found a successful place in industry. Did you have a particular reason for doing that, going to graduate school versus industry? What was your thinking there?
Yeah, so my personal thinking was that after 4 years of undergrad, I still, I had some ideas about, I understood how to write code, but I felt like I didn't really understand how to solve problems through software. I felt like I really wanted to go deeper. And so in particular, I really wanted to learn, okay, here's how you do like machine learning, computer vision. And so those were things that I was excited about. And I felt like I still had a ton more to learn. And so I decided to do grad school. But, that doesn't mean that it's necessarily the right idea. And probably, the right way will be different for every person here. I certainly see the reasoning behind going to the industry first and getting some experience there. Some people say that it's tricky after you get used to working in industry. You get used to having money, and then to go back to grad school where you're eating ramen again is hard. I don't know, because I haven't done it. Albert, did you go to grad school straight out of college, or did you have
Same. We were in the same cohort, I think, right? Or
Yeah, I think so.
I graduated a year earlier, and we're both from the same lab, actually. We had the same PhD mentor, and I guess perhaps one of the things that I do tell people the students is that some schools will actually allow you to start as a PhD student, and then if you decide it's not for you, you can just get a master's. I think that's pretty much what you did, right?
Yeah, that is what I did, and actually, it was one of the reasons why I decided to go to UCR, because, as you say, it's actually fairly rare, and in particular, schools don't like to do that because PhD students often get fellowships, where like the university pays you some kind of stipend for you to get an education there, but really they only get value out of the student if they produce really good research, right? And master students don't really do research; you just learn stuff and then bounce. And so they like master students to pay tuition. And so it's nice to kind of be able to get in through that
Got
way.
a free master's, is what you're saying.
Exactly. It was great. So happy about it.
Does Dr. B still talk to you after you pulled that on him?
No, I haven't really talked to Dr. Bonham since then.
Okay. All right. So some more questions related to this. How necessary is it to have a higher education degree in order to work at various impressive companies that you have worked for?
Yeah, that's a really great question. And I think the answer will kind of depend on the person that's hiring you. Certainly, getting an education is, for some people, it's a helpful gate to get through, right? Like, yep, this person checks that box, so I'm gonna include them in my possible candidates to interview. I personally say, when I was running Ecogate, if I saw somebody and let's say they didn't finish college, but they had either great work experience or they had just amazing projects that I could actually, visit the website and try out for myself, that had maybe real users, or that had very clearly in some other way demonstrated real world applicable skills and capabilities, I personally would not hold that against people. And I think I've made hires. Yeah, actually, I definitely hired a software engineer at Ecogate who had not finished college.
Interesting. And follow up to that, what did you gain from your higher education compared to someone who did not pursue it? So as far as I understand your motivation, you wanted to learn more. Do you believe that UCR gave you that, or do you believe that maybe someone could spend the time to do it on their own, or what value do you have with it or not?
Yeah, I do believe that UCR gave me a good education in grad school. I liked a lot of the faculty there. I feel like I certainly learned very valuable skills there. Is it possible to learn much of that on your own? Yeah, absolutely. You can just buy the same textbooks, right? But you wouldn't have access to the same faculty to guide you and answer tough questions when you get stuck. I think also it's way harder to keep yourself motivated for something like 2 years of hard work when you don't have other people who are going through it with you, and faculty and the whole support system around it. So you can do it, but it takes a lot more to do it on your own than to do it through grad school. You also, since Albert, you and I were in grad school, MOOCs have gotten very popular, and you can do like the nano degrees or like other online courses. I honestly don't have a ton of experience with that. Actually, maybe let me walk that back a little bit. I've done, TensorFlow came out after I finished grad school and I wanted to learn it, and so I went through a online class on TensorFlow and I learned it, and I've since been able to apply it in projects, and it worked. It accomplished what I was trying to do. But I am not.
Stuff. Are you talking about looking at Stack Overflow, or is that?
Sorry, what was the question?
No, it was a joke.
Oh.
Yeah. Yeah. So, okay. So, I guess, the next question then, so this question is from Jarl Ramos, and it's related to a later question by Gino, I guess. How important is it to know JavaScript in general for how the industry is currently? Is it the best choice for the students to try to become well versed in? Is it pretty common? Do you have any recommendations?
Yeah, so the answer is it really depends on what you want to do. If you want to go into robotics, then no, it's not really very important, right? Most of the code in robotics is still nowadays written in C++ and Python. And I personally don't touch JavaScript at all in my work. Thank God, because I hate all those braces, man. They drive me nuts. But there is, if you're just finishing your undergrad, I do think that it is important for you to know JavaScript, right? There's probably more web-related work out there than any other kind of software work. I hope I'm not generalizing too much in saying that. If I had to say, what languages you should know when you graduate with a computer science degree, I would probably say JavaScript and Python.
All right, cool. And then going back to internships, this question is from Gino. I guess generally, what is the best place to look at for internships? And when you got your first internship, what challenges did you face right away?
Best place to look at internships. For me personally, I find that what you're working on makes a huge difference, right? There's a world of difference between spending 9 hours at a job where you just absolutely love whatever it is that you're doing and you're excited about the company's mission and your coworkers are smart and you just love what you're doing. And, I don't know, at another place where you're filling out TPS reports, or I don't know, actually, probably your students don't even get that reference. I'm too old. Yeah, basically a job that you don't enjoy. And so my favorite place to do it is to look at the companies that I find most interesting, most exciting, and just apply to those directly, right? Go to, I don't know if it's NVIDIA, Google NVIDIA internships and do that. And then, like I said before, do that for like a lot of companies, right? Because it takes a lot of applications. So to me, that's the best way, but you can also, I don't know, I guess go on some job boards, go on LinkedIn or wherever. I'm not sure, it's been a while.
And then about the challenges though,
Oh,
yeah. Any thoughts on how someone might prepare for the challenges that would face them during an internship?
I mean, I think it's, hopefully your college education is going to prepare you for that. The internship will also really depend on the place where you're at. For me, I really had to be comfortable just like getting a really big code base and then being told, okay, so here's what I need you to figure out. And then just like diving in myself and reading a ton of documentation, reading a ton of source code and trying things and just really on myself, smoothing and figuring out how things work and how to do things. There's a lot less like hand holding than an undergrad. How would you prepare yourself for that? I'm not sure, do well in college, and then if to the extent that you can, do actual, outside of class projects where there, by its very nature, there will be less handholding.
So this is, Esme's asked a question that's somewhat related to this about JPL and your internship there. So what did you use a lot of publicly available code to assist you to make progress in JPL and Kimi? Was that a potential source of like your ability to cope with some of the projects they assigned you?
So in some of them, we relied on open source libraries. And so, certainly the documentation is good. And so just reading those docs and figuring out how to use them was good. But it wasn't, basically, as far as publicly available code, it was just, open source libraries that we relied on for some things. But, the code bases that I worked on were what's the word I'm looking for? Were private or proprietary.
All right. So new set of questions that are kind of in a different direction here. I think you're implying that these days most interviews are always done pretty much online via Zoom, right?
That has been my experience, yeah.
I think it was like that even before, right? Because I remember even in 2004, all my interviews were on Skype. That was even before Zoom was a thing, right?
Yeah, I'm trying to think. I mean, definitely. So like your first set of interviews would, but I think especially with big companies, they would like to see people in person. And I remember when I was interviewing people at Ecogate, I did like to, for the final set of interviews, have people come on site.
Mm-hmm. All right. And then this question is kind of related. I guess this is related to the online interview process. Do you have any, this is like a logistical question. You gave a tip earlier about how people need to have high quality audio. What rig do you use when with your audio? I see you have a headset there. Do you have any software, like, what do they call it? Like a virtual audio device or anything like that to filter your sound, or?
No, I have not done that. I really think the single biggest tip is just get a high quality microphone. I actually got this one, so it's fun. It's a funny story how I got this microphone. So this is an Audio Technica something, and I got this microphone as a gift because I recorded a song. You know, I play guitar, so I recorded a song like that and edited it as a soundtrack to a video that I made. And my brother heard it and he says, "You idiot! The audio quality is horrible. Here's a microphone. Use it next time." And so I've been I've been using it since then. But if I were to buy a microphone now, I would probably just go on like Wirecutter and see what microphones they recommend. This is probably in the ballpark of like $80. You know, maybe look at like the stuff that podcasters are using, the kind of, I don't know, medium tier stuff, but I don't have any special software or anything like that.
I would advise students to not go too high quality. I got a Astro headset. I asked everybody what was the best, literally the best. Like a Astro headset that assumes you have a separate power amplifier. So if they're buying this expensive, overpriced headset that would barely work, I realized I have to buy a $200 Sound Blaster digital to audio converter, and now it's just okay. I guess Nick, you're my colleague Nick is the is probably streams more than I do. Do you have any tips for the students about like how to have good audio or anything like that?
Yeah, I don't know if anyone here knows of Alex Mitz. He was an instructional designer for the campus for a bit, but he recommended around the $100 range for mics, and he had a set of like high pass filters that he would run everything through for his live stream setups. You can do that in OBS if you are using that as your platform to do a lot of the software-based processing, and that's free and can improve even the lower quality mics. I have a Blue Yeti that's just USB powered and works fairly well. Takes a little bit to dial in, and you know, it's on a swivel and it's on an arm, but I had to get ready for teaching during COVID, so the needs were a little more critical there. For interviews, you know, testing it yourself is definitely a good step before going overboard on buying equipment, but something better than the built-in laptop microphone can go a long way.
Yeah, all right. Hopefully that answers Monique's question. So going back to job-related stuff. So this is specific to NVIDIA. What does your job workflow look like? Are there sprints, tickets? What's the team size? Is there cross-team collaboration? How many hours on average do you work per week?
So I think all of those will vary by A, certainly by company, but B, by team within a company, and C, by time, right? When we have a big release, we work probably a lot more hours than if we don't have one. I should also say that I only started at NVIDIA about 2 months ago, a little less than 2 months ago. And so, and before that, I worked, other than GPL, I worked at small companies. And so for me, you know, the sheer size of the project that I'm working on has been just orders of magnitude larger. And so I still feel like I'm ramping up, and people tell me that they feel that way, you know, after 2 years in the company. I think also maybe in this way, NVIDIA is somewhat unique because we have a lot of, you know, we make both hardware and software. And so a lot of the tools that we use are built internally because, you know, you need that to work with our hardware. And so I suspect the ramp up process there is potentially longer than elsewhere. If you were working on web apps, say, and primarily using open source software. My team is about, I think, 6 people. We do 2-week sprints. We use Jira, which I'm not a huge fan of Jira personally, but you know, a lot of people seem to be using it, and I guess it does the job okay. And then we also have an internal bug tracking system. What else? Yeah, did I answer that, or was there something that I missed?
that's pretty much it. Cross-team collaboration. Does your team have to interface with other teams?
Yeah, absolutely. And so one, I think NVIDIA takes a lot of pride in kind of our one team culture, where our success as a company, I think, is in large part because we do things as, you know, one team, as a whole company. And so, and maybe that's actually doubly so for the self-driving car stack, right? Where you have to have people who design the hardware, and then people who write like the drivers for that hardware, and then people who like write the OS stuff that runs on top, that, you know, everything runs on, and then people who write software that actually, you know, steers the car and stuff. And so it's a huge amount of cross-team collaboration and a just absolutely massive undertaking. And I would say that, you know, me personally, even before NVIDIA, I have always placed a lot of emphasis and value on really great communication skills, whether that's written or spoken. I think that especially for many engineers, you know, that's often something that we don't think about a ton. And I think actually, you know, if you're accomplishing anything in a organization as part of a team, it's super critical that you be great at communicating, and you know, communication is a two-way street, right? So both listening, being an active listener, asking clarifying questions, and then also, you know, expressing yourself well. So I personally place a lot of emphasis on that. And, you know, coming back to coding interviews, Albert, maybe that's the thing that they were testing you on, right? Was, hey, you know, God, this guy didn't read the prompt right, and he didn't ask clarifying questions, right? How it's so obvious that it starts with a 0 instead of 1.
Yeah. I might be famous for my typos. I do accept pull requests into the lab manuals for students who are willing to correct my spelling errors on the lab manuals. So,
That's great.
but anyways, I'm not sure if we covered this, but I guess how many hours on average do you work per week? Do you quit at 5, and then can you just, I guess in general for software engineering, is this a sort of thing where at 5 you're just like, my contract time is up and you're just not going to answer any emails, or how's the culture?
No, certainly not. And I think, you know, you certainly can't do that at startups where often you're under-resourced and you have tight deadlines. And if you don't make the deadline, the company's going to go out of business and you're going to be looking for a job. At NVIDIA also, it's hard to do, in part because it's such a large company and it's very international, right? We have offices in Europe, offices in Asia, and so on. And so I regularly interact with teams on other continents. And so sometimes that results in like early meetings and night meetings. This week I had one meeting scheduled for 9 p.m. But that's the exception rather than the norm. And you know, that's okay. I think in general, the work-life balance so far that I'm experiencing is good. I think NVIDIA is a really, really great company. I'm super proud and happy to be working there. And I feel like I don't think I work more than like 50 hours a week so far. So
Not more than 50 though. So it's more than 40, but not more than 50, I guess.
yeah, that's it. Let's call it 40 to 50 so far.
I feel like when you're salaried, a lot of jobs just take that to mean that they can just assign you stuff whenever you want. Just I guess maybe a question that I wanted to just clarify, or maybe it was the thinking that there's not really a specific, like, this is my 9 to 5 and you're not allowed to contact me outside of contract time sort of thing, or
no, certainly for me, there's not, and there doesn't seem to be that for the team either. But I also will say that the company does its, you know, again, I think NVIDIA is a really, really great company, and I'm super happy to be here. And I think it works hard to support its employees. And so, for example, you know, I've had people be like, hey, okay, I got to pick up my kid from school. And so I don't know, at like 2 p.m. to like 2:45 or whatever, you just can't get a hold of them. But, you know, then same person will be on at like 7 p.m., you know, troubleshooting things.
all right. And we have a question from Spencer Ledwell. This is a very broad question, actually. It's about upward mobility, I guess. So in addition to working at different companies, how does your higher education degree help with upward mobility?
how does my higher education degree help with upward mobility? I mean, so certainly it helps you. I would say that it's more important early in your career than later in your career. And maybe she'll even let me rephrase that. The degree, you know, the fact that you can put it on your resume and say, hey, I have a degree from this place is more important early in your career than later in your career. I think by the time you've been in the workforce for, I don't know, something like 10 years, people will place a lot more value on the work that you have done during those 10 years than on where you graduated before that. But certainly, you know, when you're getting your first job, it is, I think, important to have that. Having said that, you know, there are, I think even a lot of the big tech companies now have, or over the past few years have been saying that they no longer will require college degrees for software jobs. So, you know, if you can demonstrate your capability in some way, then sometimes you know, you can get by without the degree. Did I answer? I feel like I'm kind of missed something about that question.
Maybe is there, so I guess because you've worked both as a software engineer and as a CEO for a company at this point. Maybe the question is about sort of climbing the ladder, sort of you're transitioning from a software engineer to a manager type person and then continuing up that chain. Is higher education necessary, like a master's of science in computer science, at some point in someone's career to do that?
I would say that probably, you know, let's say the difference when you say higher education, do you mean grad school or do you mean college?
I guess grad school. So I guess, but that was an interesting point that you made, that basically BSCS itself may not even be required, but I guess upward mobility is a question about a career from start to finish, I guess, and your ability to continue getting promoted and making more and more money, right? Within, I guess it would have to be a medium or large sized company that would allow that sort of thing. How critical is it to get your master's in either computer science or your MBA?
So in terms of getting a master's in an engineering discipline like computer science, I think that's really helpful to, and potentially even a requirement to get into fields that are kind of highly specialized, like, you know, machine learning or computer vision, right? Like if you really want to be like a top expert in a small subset of computer science, it can be helpful to get a master's degree or a PhD in that specific discipline. Having said that, if you just want to, let's say, you know, I don't know, climb the ladder at a big company like Google or something as a software engineer or even as a manager, I think a bachelor's degree will help you do that, you know, and what will really determine your success is what you do after you join the company. As far as the transition to manager, I do think an MBA can be helpful, especially if you're trying to do it in a big company. You know, that's kind of a standard way to do it. I went the non-standard route where I was just kind of thrown into the deep end and had to figure things out. And I personally, you know, I know some people with MBAs, and I feel like I've gone through a lot more than they have. And I think that the experience that I had has taught me a ton, and I'm super grateful for that. It's probably a different kind of experience than getting the MBA. Certainly getting an MBA is not going to hurt you if you really want to be a manager. And I do think if you want to do that in a big company, it probably is a good way to do it.
All right, cool. And so we have about 10 more minutes, maybe winding down. So if you have any questions that you want us to ask Christoph, please do feel free to post them. This next question is from Yana Bond. So I guess you're here from NVIDIA, you're working with self-driving cars. This is just a broad question. How do you envision the future with a self-driving car? Will there be more self-driving cars on the road and highways in the near future? What would you say to someone who is just totally opposed to self-driving cars sharing the road with other drivers?
Yeah, I do think self-driving cars are coming. I struggle to imagine what would stop them at this point. And I think they're coming for a good reason, right? They don't get tired, they don't get sloppy. I think they're going to be significantly safer than human drivers. You might even get to a point where, you know, this is way down the line, or, you know, I don't know, maybe 20 years, where you'll only be allowed to drive your car as a human on certain like designated areas, right? Like now, if you want to ride a horse, you usually just don't do it in the street. You have to go to like a riding range or something, right? One day that might be the case with cars because they'll just be so much better at certain things. What would I say to somebody who's just opposed to them? Sort of the question is, what would you say to somebody who's opposed to technological progress, right? What would you say to Luddites who are trying to stop the automated loom or whatever? I don't know. I'm not sure that it's a battle worth fighting, frankly. I would say that the important thing is to make sure that the future with self-driving cars, self-driving cars are coming. So what can we do to make sure that that future is a good future rather than trying to expend your energy trying to stop self-driving cars?
So there's another question here, Yana. When you're talking about third parties, do you mean APIs? Is that what you're talking about, or some sort of contractor?
Yeah, contractors are outsourcing, like outsourced companies.
Interesting. So actually, maybe you want to just ask your question. I see that you've unmuted yourself.
Okay. So my question was that some companies who do not want to directly hire computer vision scientists, they have another option of like outsourcing the scientists through a third-party company who does it, their specialty is in computer science, right? Like, so because you've been a CEO of a company or you helped with like startups and all that, like reflecting your experience, like what is the difference like between directly hiring scientists or, getting the tasks done through a third-party outsourced company?
Yeah, good question. And I wonder, frankly, how COVID affects that too. One of the reasons I, in particular, liked having people, having my own employees was because, if I had a question, I could be there in the same room with them and talk to them and figure things out. And I do find that communication in person is more effective than online. So having said that, you might have cases where, let's say for a certain company, let's use the computer vision example, it's really not their field of expertise, and maybe they just have a kind of a time box project where they really just need to get it working once, and then after that, they feel like it won't even require a single full-time computer vision person. And in that case, it certainly, I think, makes a lot of sense to try to outsource that specialized computer vision work to somebody who does that for a living, right? You'll get a better solution faster and cheaper, and it's probably a win for everyone. Did I answer your question, or was there something that I missed?
Yeah. And I actually asked the first question, how would you persuade someone who's so opposed to self-driving car? I asked the question in terms of like accident rate, who is so concerned about accident rate.
Yeah, I think so. In general, I think self-driving cars should become, that's the job of the regulators, to make sure that we just don't have self-driving cars that are out there just killing people left and right. I think often when people talk about it, anytime a self-driving car kills anybody, it's going to be huge news, right? And in fact, I suppose that's already happened. But it's easy to gloss over the fact that people are dying every day from cars that are being driven by other people, right? And so what you want to do is just demonstrate that self-driving cars are significantly safer than human-driven cars. And once they are, I don't see any reason to not switch to having more of them.
Indeed, trying to shoot for self-driving cars being perfectly safe is an impossible way to frame the problem. They only need to be better than humans, and humans are awful at driving. So they just have to be marginally better for the market to want to switch over.
Yep.
So we have another question here. Anything surprising that you have found? I'm not sure if you can answer this. Is there anything surprising you have found out while working with NVIDIA, code-wise, management-wise, product-wise? Maybe some knowledge pearls or tips that you might give somebody about working just generally in a large software engineering company, I guess.
Yeah, frankly, I'm still trying to figure that out. It's a big adaptation for me that I'm trying to navigate and make sure that I succeed in. I coming from companies that had less than 100 people to a company that has something like 20,000, I think, is a huge change. And I'm still trying to figure out how to be successful there. One thing that's great about that is that you have experts in-house, right? Like there's a guy who knows Python way better than you over there. And so if you have a Python question that you're struggling with or can't figure out, ask on the right forum and you'll have a really great person help you. Whereas if you're in a startup, a lot of the times you're just figuring out stuff on your own. That can be a good thing too, though, right? Because at a smaller company, you have to do a whole bunch more stuff. And so oftentimes you'll end up wearing many more hats and learning many more, kind of a lot greater breadth of technologies and skills. Yeah, I'm not sure that I have anything else that on that.
We'll take 2 more questions because we're close to the end here. What is the tech stack that you use? I guess that any IDs you want to talk about, or what sort of workflows that you use for your project currently?
Yeah, so I'll just talk about what I do personally. I don't know how much I can talk about what like the project does. I did finally make the switch to using VS Code. I had been using Emacs for a long time, but it's just VS Code.
Emacs, really?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, old school. But even so, that's the thing. Even Emacs is tricky because every system that you have comes with Vim, and then you have to convince somebody to install Emacs on it. And if that thing is a self-driving car, you better have a damn good reason to install Emacs, and it's just not going to happen. So A, I'm using VS Code when I can, and B, when I have to work in the terminal, I ended up having to learn Vim finally after 10 years of making fun of, doing the editor wars and making fun of Vim people.
Okay, well, I was about to say that at CSUB we do things classically in the Linux terminal and use Vim, but I suppose that you've already chosen your side there. But anyways,
yes. So actually, that's really great. And I for a long time when I was in college, I felt like, man, this is nuts. Why would we be doing that? Who in their right mind would still use a terminal-based editor? Well, I'm here to tell you that I do it every day here at NVIDIA. So those skills are still useful.
Nice. Okay, and then just a broad question to finish this out here. What with ChatGPT and various other AIs that seem to be able to answer very basic coding questions, do you think that might affect the job market for CS majors?
I mean, certainly it's going to affect the job market, right? That question is easy. The hard question is how. I do think, something like GitHub Copilot or those AI-powered job assistants, that they're going to keep getting better, and they're going to be here to stay. I think right now we don't quite have figured out the workflows with those, right? So for example, it might be tricky for a company working on, important proprietary non-public projects to be able to use GitHub Copilot, because when you do that, the whole file that you're working on gets uploaded to GitHub servers, and that just makes companies uncomfortable for good reason, right? But I think something like that is here to stay. I would say if we take a step back, though, the history of technology is the history of making people more productive and kind of doing more and more useful things, right? If you go way back, people were worried that, say, higher level languages like C were going to take away jobs, right? It's no longer the people that are writing assembly code, right? But that's not what happened, right? It just made developers more productive. It meant a single person and a single team could get more work done. And I think the same thing is going to happen with AI, right? You're going to use it as a tool to increase your own productivity. So you should certainly keep an eye on it, and you should find a way to make you more productive. But I don't think, certainly in the near and medium term, I don't think that that's going to destroy computer science jobs in a way that makes it harder for you guys that are graduating now to get a job.
All right, thanks. And that'll be our last question. We're at time. Christoph, do you mind if people contact you via email if they have additional questions or anything like that?
Yeah, sure. Go ahead.
Yeah, you mind posting your Oh, it's they can just Google your name pretty much,
Yeah,
right?
they can just Google my
Okay.
name, and if you can't figure it out from there, then you're not worthy of asking me questions.
And then they can also bug you about graphics cards too, right?
Yeah, you can try,
Finding 'em out.
but don't hold your breath.
All right, great. Let's thank our speaker, everybody. Let's get these virtual claps. Thanks, Christoph.
Thanks, it was a ton of fun. Thanks, everybody.
Yeah.
Bye.
All right. Bye, everybody.